Hi, I'm Bob. Thank you for joining me in solving the exercises in Chapter 9 about the properties and applications of the competitive model. We will take a look at the government policies that create a gap between marginal cost and price today. The competitive market equilibrium is distorted and a deadweight loss to society arises. We will examine the effects of a specific sales tax, a price floor, and a price ceiling on consumer surplus, producer surplus, and social welfare. Let's answer exercise 5.1. If the inverse demand function for books is P equals 60 minus Q and the supply function is Q equals P, what is the initial equilibrium? What is the welfare effect of a specific tax of T equals $2 per unit on the equilibrium, consumer surplus, producer surplus, welfare, and deadweight loss? We solve the problem in 3 steps. In the first step, we show the initial competitive equilibrium. The intersection of the demand curve and the supply curve determines the before-tax competitive equilibrium E1. Combining the demand and supply functions gives the equilibrium price of 30 and the equilibrium quantity of 30. We draw the equilibrium in the graph. In the second step, we show the after-tax equilibrium. The specific tax creates a $2 wedge between the price consumers pay and the price producers receive. The after-tax equilibrium is E2. Consumers purchase a smaller quantity at a higher price than in competitive equilibrium. Combining the demand function and the new supply function gives the after-tax equilibrium price of 31 and the equilibrium quantity of 29. In the last step, we describe the welfare effects of the tax in a table. The demand and the supply curves are linear, making it easier to do the calculation. For example, the consumer surplus before the tax is the triangle area of A plus B plus C plus D. It equals 30 times 30 divided by 2. It is 450. The consumer surplus after the tax is the area of A. It equals 29 times 29 divided by 2. It is 420.5. For the producer surplus, the before-tax producer surplus is the area of E plus F plus G plus H plus I. For the after-tax producer surplus, we have 2 ways to calculate it. It equals the area of B plus E plus H. It also equals the area of H plus I, because we can think of it this way. The producer's marginal cost is unchanged, and therefore its supply curve is still S1, but it receives the price of 29. So the producer surplus is the triangle area of H plus I. Assuming that the tax revenue is used for society, we include it in the welfare calculation. Both the consumer surplus and the producer surplus fall after tax. They are partially offset by the government's gain in tax revenue. The social welfare decreases by 1, which is the deadweight loss to society. Let's go to exercise 5.2. Suppose that the demand curve for wheat is Q equals 100 minus 10 times P, and that the supply curve is Q equals 10 times P. What are the effects of a specific tax of T equals 1 per unit on the equilibrium government tax revenue consumer surplus, producer surplus, welfare, and deadweight loss. We follow the 3 steps to solve the problem. First, we determine the before-tax market equilibrium price and quantity. Combining the demand and supply functions gives the market equilibrium price of 5 and quantity of 50. Second, we find the after-tax equilibrium. The specific tax of 1 creates a wedge between the price consumers pay and the price producers receive. Combining the functions gives the new equilibrium price of 5.5 and quantity of 45. The consumers pay 5.5 per unit, while the producer receives 4.5 per unit. The equilibrium quantity falls. Third, we describe the welfare effect of the tax and list the calculation in a table. The consumer surplus falls by 23.75. The producer surplus also falls by that amount. The government collects a tax revenue of 45. The social welfare drops by 2.5, which is the deadweight loss to society of the tax. Let's solve exercise 5.3. The initial equilibrium is E, where the linear supply curve intersects the linear demand curve. Show the welfare effects of imposing a specific tax T. Now, suppose the demand curve becomes flatter, but still goes through point E so that it is more elastic at E than originally. Discuss how the tax affects the equilibrium, consumer surplus, producer surplus, welfare, and deadweight loss differently than with the original demand curve. I list the areas of consumer surplus, producer surplus, tax revenue, and social welfare in the table. The deadweight loss to society is the area of D plus G. It is the wedge between the price consumers pay and the price producers receive. If the demand curve becomes flatter, the new equilibrium E2 has a smaller quantity and a lower price. Compared to the original demand curve, the fall in consumer surplus, the area of B plus C plus D, is smaller. The decrease in producer surplus, the area of E plus F plus G, is larger. The tax revenue, the area of B plus C plus E plus F, is smaller. The reduction in social welfare, which is also known as the deadweight loss, the area of D plus G, is larger. Let's find answers to exercise 5.4. Suppose that the demand curve for wheat is Q equals 100 minus 10 times P, and that the supply curve is Q equals 10 times P. What are the effects of a subsidy of S equals 1 per unit on the equilibrium, government subsidy cost, consumer surplus, producer surplus, welfare, and deadweight loss? We still follow the 3 steps to solve the problem. In the first step, we find the before subsidy equilibrium E1. Combining the demand and supply functions gives the equilibrium price of 5 and quantity of 50. In the second step, we find the after subsidy equilibrium E2. Suppose the subsidy goes to consumers. From the original inverse demand function, we can write the after subsidy inverse demand function. Combining the new demand and supply functions gives the new equilibrium price of 5.5 and quantity of 55. The producers receive a price of 5.5 per unit, and the consumers actually pay 4.5 per unit with the subsidy. In the third step, we calculate the consumer surplus, producer surplus, subsidy cost, and welfare changes. I list the results in a table. We can use the symmetric of the graph to simplify the results. Social welfare equals consumer surplus plus producer surplus minus the government subsidy cost. The loss in social welfare is H, which is also known as the deadweight loss to society. In the graph, it is the wedge between the price producers receive and the price consumers actually pay. We can calculate the numbers. The consumer surplus increases by 26.25, the same as the rise in producer surplus. The government subsidy cost is 55. The deadweight loss to society of the subsidy is 2.5. Thank you for solving the exercises with me today. See you tomorrow for the remaining exercises in this section. Goodbye. Thank you for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. See you next time.